I used to read the Bible out loud just to mock it. That is not something I am proud of, but it is the truth, and if I am going to tell you this story, I have to begin there. My name is Faisal Al Saud. I am 34 years old, born into a family where power and religion were inseparable, where faith was not just belief, but identity, and where questioning either was seen as betrayal. I grew up behind high walls and guarded gates, surrounded by wealth, influence, and expectations that pressed on me from the moment I could understand language. As a child, I memorized verses before I understood their meaning, repeating sacred words while fear silently shaped my heart. I was taught discipline, obedience, and loyalty above all things, and I learned quickly that doubt had consequences. The men in my family carried authority with quiet confidence, and I admired them, feared them, and longed to be like them. At least, that is what I told myself. But there was always something beneath the surface, something I could not name, a quiet emptiness, a feeling that no matter how perfectly I performed my duties, something inside me remained unsettled. At night, when the palace grew silent and the world seemed to pause, I would lie awake staring into the darkness, asking questions I never dared speak aloud. Why do I feel distant from God instead of close to Him? Why does fear follow me even in prayer? Those thoughts terrified me, so I buried them beneath pride. I became louder in my beliefs, sharper in my arguments, quicker to dismiss anything that challenged my understanding, and nothing was easier to dismiss than Jesus. To me, he was simply a figure Christians exaggerated, someone misunderstood, someone I could confidently reduce to a footnote in a religion I believed was flawed. I would joke about him, imitate Christian ideas with sarcasm, and feel justified doing it, as if I were defending truth itself. But looking back now, I realized something deeper was happening. I was not just mocking, I was hiding, because deep inside, I was afraid that if I ever looked closely, if I ever truly examined what I claimed to reject, I might find something I could not explain. If you are listening to this now, maybe you have felt something similar, a quiet question you keep pushing away, a thought that refuses to disappear. If that is you, stay with me, because what happened next did not begin with faith. It began with pride, laughter, and a decision I thought was harmless. The night I gathered my family and decided to read from the Bible out loud. I believed I was about to prove something. I had no idea that moment would become the beginning of everything unraveling in my life. That evening felt ordinary at first, the kind of quiet gathering we had experienced countless times before. Family seated in a private room, voices low, laughter controlled, every movement wrapped in unspoken rules of respect and hierarchy. My cousins lounged comfortably. My older brother leaned back with confidence, and my uncle observed everything with the calm authority he always carried. When the topic of Christianity came up, I felt that familiar spark of pride rise within me, the need to assert what I believed was truth. I smiled, leaned forward, and said, "Let me show you something." There was a certain excitement in my voice, a confidence that made them curious. I left the room briefly and returned with passages I had saved, sections of the Bible I had studied, only so I could tear them apart. I sat down, cleared my throat, and began to read, but not with sincerity, with performance. I exaggerated phrases, twisted meanings, and added sarcasm to every line, turning sacred words into entertainment. The room responded exactly as I expected, laughter spreading, heads nodding, the feeling of approval settling over me like a reward. When I read lines about love and forgiveness, I paused deliberately, then scoffed, asking how anyone could live like that, how weakness could ever be mistaken for truth. More laughter followed, louder this time, and I felt powerful, as if I had successfully defended something important. But then something unexpected happened. I read a sentence that did not feel weak at all. "Forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." The word slipped out of my mouth, and for a brief moment the room faded. It was subtle, almost invisible, but inside me something shifted. I could not explain it. and I did not allow it to linger. I quickly laughed, made another joke, and continued until the mood returned to what it had been before: light, dismissive, comfortable. When the gathering ended, everyone moved on as if nothing significant had occurred, conversations drifting to other topics, the moment forgotten by everyone except me. Later that night, alone in my room, I tried to sleep, but my mind refused to rest. The words kept returning, not loudly, not forcefully, but persistently, like a whisper that would not fade. Forgive them. I turned in my bed, frustrated, trying to push the thought away, reminding myself of everything I had been taught, everything I believed. Yet the question remained: why would someone choose forgiveness in the face of pain? Why would someone speak like that without anger or pride? It did not fit the framework I had built in my mind, and that unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. After what felt like hours, I sat up, reached for my phone, and opened the same passages again. But this time, there was no audience, no laughter, no performance. Just me, the silence, and words I no longer read to mock. For the first time in my life, I was not trying to prove anything. I was trying to understand, and that realization alone was enough to make my heart race, because something had changed. Something small but undeniable, and I could feel it beginning to grow. When I was a child, questions were dangerous, not because they had no answers, but because they were not allowed to exist. I remember sitting on a thin carpet in a small, dimly lit room, reciting verses under the watchful gaze of my teacher, his presence heavy, his voice sharp, correcting every hesitation with precision. We were not there to understand. We were there to repeat, to memorize, to become vessels of something we were never invited to examine. One afternoon, I made a mistake, not in recitation, but in curiosity. I paused mid-verse, my voice uncertain, and I asked a simple question: why does this mean something different from what I was told? Before the sentence could fully leave my mouth, the sound of his hand striking me echoed in the room, sudden and final. "Do not question what is clear," he said, his tone leaving no space for response. In that moment, something inside me shifted, not just fear, but a decision, a quiet agreement with myself that silence was safer than truth. From that day forward, I learned to bury every doubt before it could take shape, to nod even when I did not understand, to accept even when something felt wrong. Years passed, and I became exactly what was expected of me: confident in appearance, disciplined in behavior, respected in my knowledge. But inside, the questions never disappeared. They only waited. Now, sitting alone in my room as an adult, reading the Bible in secret, those buried thoughts began to rise again, stronger than before. Some passages confused me, challenging everything I had accepted without question, while others reached places inside me I had forgotten existed. I found myself drawn to words about love, grace, and truth, ideas that felt unfamiliar, yet strangely right, as if they were speaking to something deeper than intellect. I started reading every night, carefully locking my door, lowering the brightness on my phone, listening for any sound that might signal someone approaching, my heart racing with every small noise. I felt like I was living a hidden life, one that could not survive exposure, one that would bring consequences I was not prepared to face, yet I could not stop. One night, I came across a verse that seemed to stop time itself. "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." I read it again and again, the words echoing in my mind, challenging something fundamental within me. Free was not a word I associated with my life. I had everything: status, respect, security, yet I felt confined by expectations I never chose, bound by fear of what would happen if I stepped outside the lines. What if freedom was real, not political, not social, but something deeper, something spiritual, something that could change everything I thought I knew? That idea terrified me, because if it was true, then everything I had built my identity on could collapse. Every relationship, every expectation, every certainty. And as I sat there in the quiet darkness, holding my phone with trembling hands, I realized something that sent a chill through my entire body. If anyone discovered what I was doing, what I was reading, what I was beginning to believe, my life as I knew it would not just change. It would be destroyed. The night it happened, I was not expecting anything unusual. No sign, no voice, no moment that would divide my life into before and after. I had been reading quietly as I had done for many nights, the glow of my phone illuminating the darkness of my room, my thoughts drifting between curiosity and fear. Eventually, exhaustion overcame me, and I fell asleep without even realizing it, the words still fresh in my mind. Then suddenly, I was somewhere else. I cannot explain how I knew it was not just a dream, but everything felt different, more real than anything I had experienced before. I was standing in a vast open space, not empty, but filled with a light that seemed to have no source, no direction, just presence. It was not blinding, yet it revealed everything. It was not overwhelming, yet it carried a weight I could feel deep within me. For the first time in my life, I was not afraid. There was no pressure, no expectation, no judgment hanging over me, just a peace so complete that it felt unfamiliar, almost impossible to accept. Then I saw him. At first it was just a figure in the distance, slowly walking toward me, not hurried, not forceful, but certain. Every step he took felt intentional, as if he had always been moving toward this moment. I wanted to run, not because I felt threatened, but because something inside me knew that if he reached me, everything would change. My body would not move. I was held in place, not by force, but by something deeper, something that felt like truth itself. As he came closer, I could not fully see his face, yet I did not need to. There was something about him that went beyond sight, something I recognized without ever having seen before. My heart began to pound, my thoughts racing, trying to make sense of what was happening, trying to explain it away. But I could not. Then he spoke, my name, Faisal, not loudly, not harshly, but with a clarity that cut through everything I had ever known. No one had ever said my name like that before, not with authority and gentleness at the same time, not with a sense that it carried meaning beyond identity. You are searching for truth, he said, and his voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was not just sound, it was presence. It was something that seemed to reach into me and reveal everything I had tried to hide. And then he said words that echoed through me. I am the way. There was no argument in his tone, no demand, just certainty, a calm, as unshakable certainty that left no room for doubt. In that moment I felt exposed, not in a way that brought shame, but in a way that brought understanding, as if everything about me had been seen, and yet I was still standing there, still accepted, still known. Then suddenly, I woke up. My body was shaking, my breath uneven, my heart racing as if I had been running. I looked around my room, everything familiar, everything the same, yet nothing felt the same anymore. I sat there in silence, trying to convince myself it was just a dream, just imagination, just my mind responding to everything I had been reading. But deep inside I knew that explanation was not enough, because I had never experienced anything like that before. Not in prayer, not in worship, not in any moment of my life. What I felt in that place was not fear. It was peace, and that terrified me more than anything else. Because if what I experienced was real, then the one I had mocked, the one I had dismissed, the one I thought I understood, was far more than I had ever allowed myself to believe. And that realization began to unravel everything I thought I knew. After that night, I tried to return to normal, but normal no longer existed for me. Everything looked the same walls, the same voices, the same routines, yet something inside me had shifted in a way I could not reverse. By day, I remained who everyone expected me to be. I attended prayers. I greeted my family with respect. I spoke with confidence when religion was discussed, and I performed every role that had been written for me since childhood. But inside, there was another reality forming, quiet but undeniable. Every night I returned to the Bible, not with hesitation anymore, but with a hunger I could not explain. I needed to understand what I had experienced. I needed to know if what I saw was real, or if I was losing control of my own thoughts. I began reading longer, deeper, moving from one passage to another, searching for something that would confirm or deny what was happening within me. And the more I read, the more I felt something I had never felt before. Not fear, not obligation, but a strange sense of being seen, as if the words were not just written, but alive, speaking directly into the places I had hidden for years. I started listening to teachings in secret, lowering the volume until it was barely audible. You watching testimonies of people who spoke about Jesus with a certainty that unsettled me. Many of them came from backgrounds similar to mine, men and women who had everything to lose, yet spoke about finding something worth more than all of it. At first, I resisted identifying with them, telling myself my situation was different, that I was in control, that I could stop whenever I wanted. But deep down, I knew that was not true, because something was pulling me, gently but persistently, toward a truth I had spent my entire life avoiding. At the same time, my outward life began to change in ways I could not fully hide. I became quieter during family discussions, less eager to engage in debates, less certain in the confidence I once displayed. My brother noticed it first, his eyes narrowing slightly as he observed me one evening. "You have been distant," he said, his tone casual, but his gaze searching. I forced a small smile, saying I was just tired, but even as I spoke, I could feel the weakness in my answer. I was not tired. I was divided, torn between two worlds that could not coexist, one built on everything I had known, the other emerging from something I did not yet fully understand. I found myself hesitating during prayers, my mind drifting, my heart no longer fully present, and that alone filled me with guilt and fear. I wondered if I was betraying my family, my identity, everything I had been taught to honor. Yet, at the same time, I felt a growing conviction that I was moving closer to something real, something I could not deny no matter how hard I tried. The tension became unbearable at times. I'd like standing on a line that was slowly disappearing beneath my feet. I knew I could not remain in this place forever. I could not continue pretending while something inside me was changing so deeply. And with each passing day, the possibility of being discovered became more real, more immediate, more dangerous. I began to sense that it was only a matter of time before everything hidden would come into the light, and when it did, I would be forced to choose between the life I had always known and the truth that was quietly taking hold of my heart. The moment everything collapsed did not come with warning, it came with silence. I remember walking back into the sitting room and seeing my cousin holding my phone, his expression unreadable, his posture still, as if time itself had paused around him. My chest tightened instantly, while a cold weight settling deep inside me before a single word was spoken. The screen was lit, the Bible app open, the words I had been reading exposed in a way I had feared but never truly prepared for. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low, controlled, but carrying something far heavier than curiosity. I tried to respond, but my mouth felt dry, my thoughts scattered, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. "It is nothing," I said, but even as the words left me, I knew they carried no truth, no strength, no protection. Within minutes, the room filled, footsteps echoing through the halls, voices calling others in, the atmosphere shifting from confusion to confrontation. My father entered, his presence commanding as always, but there was something different in his eyes, something sharper, something colder. "Explain yourself," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for delay. I opened my mouth again, searching for words that could somehow repair what had already been broken. but nothing came out clearly. "I have just been reading," I managed to say, but the sentence felt weak, incomplete, dangerous. "Reading what?" my uncle asked, though he already knew. The questions began to come faster now, overlapping, pressing in from every direction. "Are you doubting? Have you been influenced? Do you understand what this means?" Each question felt like a blow, not physical, but heavy enough to shake me to my core. Then came the words I had always feared hearing directed at me. "Shame, betrayal. You bring dishonor to this family." My father did not raise his voice, but his silence between words was more powerful than shouting. "You know who you are," he said, "and you know what is expected of you." I nodded, but inside, something resisted, something that had grown too strong to ignore. They called a religious leader, a man I had known since childhood, someone whose authority had never been questioned in our home. He sat across from me, calm, composed, his gaze steady, as if he could see through every layer of my thoughts. "You are being tested," he said gently, almost kindly. "This is confusion, not truth. Turn back now, before it goes too far." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to take that path, to say the words that would end the tension, restore the peace, bring everything back to the way it was before. But as I sat there, surrounded by expectation, fear tightening around me like a cage, I realized something I could not ignore. The peace I had felt, the presence I had encountered, the truth I had begun to see, none of it felt like confusion. It felt real, more real than anything I had ever known. My hands trembled slightly as I looked from one face to another, the people who had defined my entire life, the ones whose approval I had always sought, the ones I now stood on the verge of losing. I understood in that moment that this was not just a conversation, not just a correction. It was a turning point. There was no middle ground left. If I denied what was happening inside me, I could keep everything. If I accepted it, I could lose everything. And as the weight of that realization settled over me, I felt a quiet certainty rise within my chest. Something steady, something unshakable, something that told me the decision I was about to make would change my life forever. The room grew quiet after the last words were spoken. A silence so heavy it felt like the air itself was watching me, waiting for my answer. I could feel every eye fixed on me, my father's gaze firm and unyielding, my uncle's expression hardened, the religious leader still calm but expectant, as if he already knew how this should end. My heart was racing, my thoughts colliding, fear pressing in from every direction, reminding me of everything I stood to lose. My name, my family, my place. Everything I had ever known was standing on the edge of this moment, and all it would take was one sentence to preserve it all. I could feel the words forming, the easy answer, the safe answer, the one that would make all of this disappear. I almost said it. I almost gave in to the weight of expectation, to the fear that had guided so many of my decisions before. But then something shifted, not outside, but inside. A quiet strength rising in the middle of the chaos, steady, undeniable, reminding me of the peace I had felt, the voice I had heard, the truth I could no longer ignore. I lifted my head slowly, my hands still trembling, my voice unsteady at first, but growing clearer with each word. "I cannot go back." The sentence hung in the air, simple yet irreversible. For a brief moment, no one spoke, as if the meaning had not yet fully reached them. Then the reaction came, immediate and intense. My father's expression darkened, disappointment and anger mixing in a way I had never seen directed at me before. "You do not understand what you are saying," he replied, his voice controlled but filled with warning. "You are confused, influenced, led away from what is right." I shook my head slowly, my chest tightening as I forced myself to continue. "No," I said quietly. "But for the first time in my life, I am not confused. I am seeing clearly. The words felt like they were coming from somewhere deeper than my fear, somewhere I had never accessed before, and even as I spoke them, I knew there was no returning from this. "You would abandon your family for this?" my uncle asked, his tone sharp, almost disbelieving. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of that question press into every part of me, because the answer was not simple, it was not easy, it was not something I wanted to face. "I am not abandoning you," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I am choosing truth." The room erupted again, voices rising, accusations returning, the sense of betrayal filling the space like a storm, breaking through everything that once felt stable. But beneath all of it, beneath the noise, beneath the pain, there was something else, like something unexpected, peace. It did not remove the fear, it did not erase the loss, but it remained steady, like a quiet anchor holding me in place when everything else was shaking. That day, I felt the distance form, not as a single moment, but as a separation that would continue long after I left the room. I was no longer seen the same way, no longer spoken to the same way, no longer part of what I had always belonged to. And when I finally stood and walked toward the door, every step felt heavier than the last, as if I were leaving behind more than just a place, more than just people, as if I were walking away from an entire life that had once defined me. I paused for a moment before stepping out, not turning back, not because I did not care, but because I knew if I looked again, that it might break something inside me that had just begun to stand. Then I walked out, no longer held by the name that once carried everything, but carried instead by a truth I had chosen, a truth that had already begun to change me in ways I was only beginning to understand. And as the door closed behind me, I realized that I had just stepped into a life where nothing would ever be the same again. Alone, the palace walls no longer felt like protection. They felt like prison. I wandered through the empty corridors, every echo of my footsteps a reminder that the life I had known was slipping away, that the faces I loved would no longer look at me with the same warmth, that my name no longer carried the weight it once had. I felt grief in a way I had never imagined, a grief that was raw and unrelenting, settling in my chest, in my stomach, what in every part of me, whispering that I had lost everything that mattered. Then I sat alone in my small room, clutching the Bible I had once read to mock, now holding it like a lifeline. My fingers traced the words, the passages that had brought me here, and I realized I had never truly understood the meaning of being lost until that moment. I cried, quietly at first, then with a force I could not contain, letting out everything I had buried for decades, the fear, the confusion, the shame, the longing for acceptance, the pain of being rejected by my own blood. Every tear felt like a release, like a letting go of chains I had worn unknowingly. I began to pray, not the prayers I had recited so mechanically for years, but raw, desperate words from a heart that had been silenced for too long. "Lord," I whispered, "if you are real, show me the way. I am lost, I am afraid, but I am willing to follow." The words felt small, inadequate, yet somehow powerful, filling the emptiness with the faintest spark of hope. As days turned into weeks, I discovered a hidden network, a secret community of believers who had also walked paths of fear and rejection. They welcomed me, not with judgment, not with questions about my past, but with understanding, with love, with a quiet assurance that I was not alone. Their stories mirrored mine, their struggles familiar, their courage inspiring. I realized then that family was not only blood, that connection and belonging could exist beyond the walls I had once called home. I spent hours listening, learning, praying, letting the words sink in, letting the truth penetrate the deepest parts of me. I began to understand what it meant to have faith without fear, to know love without conditions, to stand in peace even when the world outside still pressed hard against me. The loneliness remained, yes, but it changed shape. It became a space for reflection, for growth, for healing, a necessary crucible in which the old self was stripped away and the new self began to emerge. I walked through that pain with trembling steps, but I walked forward, and with every day, the weight lessened, replaced by clarity and freedom. I began to see that the life I had lost was temporary, that the fear I had carried was only a shadow of what I could gain, and that the love I had found in Christ was something no force on earth could take away. I felt the first real taste of freedom in my life. Not the freedom that comes from status or wealth, but the freedom of knowing that I could stand in truth, that I could be myself, that I could live unafraid, and for the first time, I understood what it meant to be truly alive. The day of the final confrontation arrived quietly, without fanfare, but the weight of it pressed down on me like the sun at noon, heavy and unavoidable. I was summoned to a private chamber, one I had walked through countless times as a son, a prince, a member of a family whose expectations shaped my every breath. But this time, I entered not as who I had been, but as who I had become, and that alone made the air tense. The room held my father, my uncle, and the same religious leader who had confronted me before. They sat in silence, their faces unreadable, their presence commanding, as if the moment itself had been waiting for me to arrive. "You have one last chance," my father said quietly, his words calm but sharp with authority. "You can renounce this and return to the fold, to the family, to everything you have ever known." I felt my chest tighten, a familiar pressure of fear, of history, of all that I had been trained to obey. I wanted to speak the words they wanted, to say the sentence that would erase conflict, restore peace, preserve identity. But I could not, because deep inside, something stronger than fear, stronger than expectation, stronger than everything I had ever been taught, held me in place. My eyes met my father's, and I saw the same love and disappointment I had always known, now tinged with disbelief. "You would abandon all of this for what?" my uncle asked, his voice sharper now. What disbelief and concern weaving together. I swallowed, feeling the lump in my throat, and spoke with a calm I did not yet feel fully, yet that truth demanded. "I have not abandoned," I said slowly. "I have chosen what is real, what is true, what gives life. I am standing in faith, in Christ, and in Him I have found peace they could not offer, a peace I could not ignore." Even as the words left me, the room seemed to hold its breath, the weight of history, of expectation, of authority pressing against me like an invisible wall. They tried again, softer now, appealing to identity, legacy, family honor, the fear of consequences, yet I remained still, letting each argument wash over me, each warning reach my ears without shaking my resolve. I spoke calmly, carefully, every word chosen to explain, not to provoke, not to argue, but to bear witness to the truth I had discovered. I explained that fear had ruled my life for too long, that obedience without understanding had suffocated me, that the love and grace I had encountered could not be ignored, that my soul was alive in ways I had never known before, and in that room, filled with faces that had once defined me, I felt a strange clarity, a quiet courage, a certainty I had never experienced before. They did not understand, and I did not expect them to. But the moment became a turning point, not in victory or acceptance, but in truth. I stood firm, fully aware of the cost, fully aware that my family might never accept me again, fully aware that my name, my status, my past could no longer protect me. Yet despite it all, I felt no regret, only peace, because I was standing where I was meant to stand. Because in the light of something far greater than fear, far greater than expectation, far greater than loss. The confrontation ended not with reconciliation, not with applause, not with relief, but with separation, calm yet final, a recognition that the cost of truth was high, yet the cost of denying it would have been higher. I walked away from that chamber carrying the weight of what I had lost, but also the quiet certainty of what I had gained, knowing that this was the path I had been led to, and that no power on earth could take away the freedom I had found in Christ. Looking back now, I can see the journey in a way I could not while living it. Each step, each tear, each moment of fear, each night spent alone reading words I was once meant to mock. We all led to this place of quiet clarity. I have lost everything the world offered. My family's approval, my status, my name carried no weight anymore. But I have gained something eternal. I have gained a relationship with Jesus, a peace that does not depend on circumstance, a love that does not falter when the world turns against me. I wake each morning with a freedom I never knew existed, the chains of expectation and fear replaced by a strength that is not my own. A friend once asked me, Faisal, do you regret it? Do you regret leaving everything behind? And I have to answer honestly, no, I do not regret it, because what I found is worth more than any crown, more than any title, more than anything I could have imagined. I speak now not only to tell my story, but to reach those who are searching, those who are questioning, so those who feel the quiet stirring of truth in their hearts. It is not easy. It is not safe. It is not without cost. But there is a freedom waiting that the world cannot give, a love waiting that the world cannot take away. I want to tell you, if you are listening, that fear is natural, doubt is natural, loss is real, but so is hope, so is grace, so is the presence of a God who sees you, knows you, and calls you by name. Every day I walk in that presence. I remember the moment I first felt it, the dream, the peace that entered my soul like nothing else ever had. I remember the fear that tried to hold me back, and I smile because I know now that no matter what the world demands, no matter what I have lost, I am never alone. I share this testimony not to boast, not to provoke, but to encourage those who are quietly wrestling with the same questions I once tried to silence. To anyone feeling trapped, confused, or fearful, hear me now. Seek truth, follow the light, and do not be afraid to stand for what you know is real, even if it costs everything you have known, because what you will find is worth it, beyond measure, beyond understanding, and eternal. I have found the truth they tried to hide, the love that cannot be taken, the freedom that cannot be chained. I am living proof that even in the most unlikely places, even in the darkest moments, even when everything seems lost, God is faithful and His Son is alive, and the life He offers is more real, more beautiful, and more sustaining than anything the world can ever give. And for that, I am grateful beyond words. And I will carry this truth for the rest of my days, sharing it with anyone who will listen, hoping that my journey can light the way for someone else, as my own path was illuminated by the one who never left me, never condemned me, and never stopped calling me to the freedom I now live.